whose legacy is being celebrated this weekend on the anniversary of his death in 2020, John Lewis received the following injustices and injuries. In the nonviolent Nashville sit-in movement, he was arrested and jailed several times. In 1961, Lewis became one of the original 13 Freedom Riders, people who were simply riding an interstate bus to oppose the unjust policies of segregated seating, a policy which had been found already to be unconstitutional. Lewis was attacked in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when he went into a waiting room. Later on the trip, he was imprisoned for 40 days in a penitentiary. In Montgomery, Alabama, he was hit on the head with a wooden crate and left lying on the floor of a Greyhound bus station unconscious. In 1965, Lewis was a leader in organizing voter registration in Selma, Alabama, and helped to lead the Selma to Montgomery marches. On March 7th of that year, over 600 people marched with him across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma and were met on the other side by Alabama state troopers with tear gas, nightsticks, and attack dogs. The state troopers attacked the crowd, beating the people with the nightsticks, allowing dogs to bite and to tear at them. Lewis's skull was fractured in that incident, a scar he bore for the rest of his life. Over the course of his work in civil rights, John Lewis was arrested 24 times. As a young person, John Lewis aspired to be a minister and is known for having preached to the family chickens when he was young. He received degrees from 2 different historically black colleges in religion and philosophy, and was one of the 12 people to speak at the 1963 March on Washington. Lewis famously said, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America." He was a minister, a good kid, a reader, the third of 10 children, the one who wanted to become a minister. Where do you think he got the idea that he should be getting into trouble at all? Where did he get the idea that there was, in fact, a kind of getting into trouble that not only was good, but necessary? Who told him that there was such a thing as good trouble? Believe it or not, it was God. We're taught to equate the God of our faith with rule following, a fatherly disciplinarian who's watching us 24 hours a day to ensure that we ate our vegetables, did our homework, never talked back to our parents, and most importantly, obeyed the authority figures around us unquestioningly. In fact, the God we are presented with in our sacred text is a God who undermines every powerful ruler on the planet, the most powerful rulers on the planet. Who's the most powerful person in Moses' time? Pharaoh. Whose law is absolute? Who maintains the peace and keeps the entire system running? Pharaoh. And Moses gets a shot to be in good with Pharaoh. Why isn't our story one where Moses parlays his position into a really good life, where he uses his privilege to uphold Pharaoh and keep those systems in place? Instead, we get a story where Moses murders an Egyptian for abusing an Israelite. We get a story where God intervenes in Moses' life to send him back to Egypt to free the people of Israel. We get a story where God, in the end, gets fed up with Pharaoh and hardens his heart and kills his firstborn child and steals the people of Israel and a great deal of the wealth of Egypt in the process of freeing the people from slavery. Does that sound like a God whose desire is for the people of God to appease brutal rulers, to kowtow to power? John Lewis might have noticed that the God of Israel isn't intimidated by the might of Babylon either, nor when Babylon expands to create the empire of Persia is God hesitant to intervene. It is God who sends Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar to help prepare the land for the famine. It is God who sends protection to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace when they refused to bow down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. It is God who, when the forces arise to destroy Daniel and the emperor Darius is tricked into throwing Daniel in the lion's den, it is God who protects Daniel. And the rulers set up in power of the people of Israel don't get a pass either. If they harm the people, God takes them down. Kings who fail to enact the justice of God are often short-reigned. Even David, beloved to everyone, is exposed in his own court in front of everyone as having murdered Uriah and stolen his wife, and is then punished and humbled by God. The overwhelming view of God's interactions with the rulers of the earth is that if they flout the way of God, the way of justice, the way of protection, the way of faithfulness, they do so to their peril. It is injustice and inhospitality that God punishes at Sodom and Gomorrah, a fact reiterated by Isaiah even hundreds of years later. John Lewis might also have noticed a pattern that pervades the book of Acts. People keep getting freed from prison. Random targeted earthquakes break chains open. Angels visit jail cells. Ships run aground. Lewis might even have noticed that Jesus' death was injustice, that Jesus was dragged before one kangaroo court after another, that Herod was corrupt and unloved by God, that Pilate was a callous cynic, that the Pharisees abandoned all steadfast love of the people called for in Scripture for the trappings of religiosity, for the appearance of being good. John Lewis, who was arrested 24 times, often when he was not breaking any laws, often when he was exercising a right protected in our country's most sacred document, the Constitution, John Lewis might have noticed that God tended not to side with governments, especially those who abuse and oppress their people. John Lewis must have noticed that the God portrayed in our scriptures is not a God who advocates for the power of empire, but a God who rises up the most unlikely heroes to stand opposed to empire, to defend the rights of the least of these, the brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ. And so John Lewis, who trained as a minister, who completed his education the way our culture tells us we should, who was a United States congressman from 1987 to 2020, who was arrested 24 times, who was beaten and tear-gassed and had his skull crushed while he was exercising his rights as a citizen, John Lewis advised us that we should get into good trouble, necessary trouble. Why? John Lewis says that getting into good trouble will help redeem the soul of America. Lewis didn't just advise citizens to use their rights to protest unjust practices. Lewis couches his advice to his fellow citizens in the language of our faith. This practice of getting into good trouble is the way we can be part of the redemption of America's soul. America is empire. Just like Egypt, just like Persia, Just like Greece, just like Rome, just like the Aztecs, just like the Mayans, just like Spain, just like England. And what do empires historically do? Empires rise and empires fall. It is not empires that are eternal, although empires almost always think they are going to be eternal. John Lewis believed that America has a soul that could be redeemed, a soul that could be cleansed of its racism, of its hatred for the other, a soul that could be forgiven for the sins of her past, a soul that could live up to the ideals of her sacred documents, creating a place where everybody actually is treated equally, where people could fulfill their dreams and be at peace with each other. Lewis' faith was in a God of good trouble. His faith in a country that failed him repeatedly over his lifetime is perhaps the closest faith we have seen in our lifetimes to a faith parallel with the Apostle Peter's or the Apostle Paul's. A hopeful faith that continues to push for the good, a faith that stands before the powers that want to silence it and says, sorry, but we can't help but talk about what we have seen and heard from Jesus. A faith that despite multiple imprisonments continues to push for the good, continues to work miracles, to heal, to preach, to transform. A faith that does not allow the fear of what others might think, the fear of breaking some rule of politeness, the fear of not conforming to the will of parents or authority figures from the past, but instead comes from within, understands the priorities of God, and continues to push obnoxiously even for the least of these, the brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ. You know where I'm going with this. We're not called to go to church. Going to church is what we do for us, how we maintain our sense of peace, how we grow in our faith. Going to church is what we do to cultivate the relationship we have with the God of good trouble, the nosy God, the interfering God, the inconvenient God, the iconoclastic God, the inappropriate God, the burr in the saddle God who fears no ruler, no senator, no president, but hates the thought of even one of the people being subjected to injustices so much that God will send a small earthquake or angels from the realms of glory to make it right. And we're called to serve the least of these, our fellow brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ. We're called to interfere and intervene when they are abused, to stand in righteous indignation on their behalf, to use what power and privilege we have to redeem the soul of our people. And if we want to know what the task of those who call themselves Christians might be, it is that. It's easy enough to provide lunches for those serving the community. It's easy enough to do the labor of working on houses. It's easy enough to give money to help agencies which help the poor. That's not the totality of our call. The call also includes seeking out injustice. It involves using our voices, our time, risking little beyond our reputation and our comfort to make sure that we are part of the work of helping to redeem the soul of our people. To make sure that we are following the will of the God of good trouble. What I like most about the example of John Lewis is that he did not rise to the mythical status of some of our national heroes. He was a leader, a congressman, one of many. He rose from poverty in a relatively normal way, working hard in school and stepping forward when the chances arose. He was courageous and bold and determined, and also humble enough to just do the work of a congressman for 3 decades. His example is doable, and it is biblical. Like Peter, a local fisherman who just kept doing the next right thing, who couldn't help but talk about Jesus, who got arrested and beaten and kept following in the footsteps of the one he revered, transcending the rules he was brought up with in order to welcome Gentiles into the kingdom about which he preached, getting for the rest of life into a lot of good trouble to help to redeem the soul of his people. These are our examples, and this is our call. This morning, on my way into church, the song "Bridge Over Troubled Waters" came up on my playlist. This is a sacred song in my family. It's one that my mother used to play as a prelude in church. The song she played for me while I was in labor with my first child, a line from which is inscribed on the bracelet that I wear every Sunday, a gift from her when I graduated from college. And the song says, "When you're weary and feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. When times are rough and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down." This is the promise of the God of good trouble, the God who intervenes between us and empire, the God who gives us the strength to do the same. This is the promise we make to each other, not just to those of us who are our friends who would do the same for us, but for the brothers and sisters we don't know, the ones that Jesus adopted, the ones that God sees. We have good examples to pattern ourselves on, good teachers to live by, a list of names too long to recite here, which includes our friend and chaotic hero, Peter, and continues through our friend and responsible citizen, John Lewis. Let us, the followers of the God who stirs things up, let us meditate on how we might act as bridges over troubled waters, how we might get into some good trouble, how we might be part of helping to redeem the soul of our people. Amen.